Hello and welcome to episode 290 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at DynastyDadFF. We were spoiled by the 2024 wide receiver class. They came in, they changed the Dynasty landscape. We're going to see that in 2025 with the running backs. But today what we want to talk about is we're going to do a recap of the 2024 rookies, just how special this class was, what they were able to do, how they compare to the 2025 class coming in. Nobody better to do that with than my main man, Snoog.
I'm excited for this one. I mean, we just got over a damn near generational wide receiver draft class. Probably goes down as the best in a while in the 2024 class. And now we're jumping into kind of one of the worst ones we've seen in a while. So we're going to do a combined rankings for you, kind of see how some of these guys stack up as prospects and kind of as projected values in Dynasty. And I'm excited for this one because it's going to be a lot of 2024 guys.
Before I even start on the wide receivers, I got to drop it because he belongs in here. Brock Bowers. 23.6% target share, 150 targets, 112 receptions, almost 1,200 receiving yards, mix in 5 touchdowns. I mean, Snoog, he's going to be a guy like this sounds insane, but I think we just saw the floor because he only had 5 touchdowns with an absolute horrendous quarterback. I mean, I know this is the wide receiver show, but you and I keep saying it like if you own Brock Bowers, if they don't back up the Briggs truck of just straight cash, we're out. You keep Brock Bowers. I mean, this was truly a generational talent that you and I had scouted out before, maybe floated around in that mid-first. But, man, there is no value outside of quarterbacks that I'm really considering making a lot of moves with Brock Bowers.
Yeah, he is like the one. I know people don't like getting that generational label thrown around, but Brock Bowers was generational. We knew he was generational. We said he was generational. And now you see the results. Best tight end prospect ever. And we said that all off season.
Yeah, that's not half bad. Best ever. I think everybody keeps messaging me in the Discord. They're messaging me on Twitter. They're like, Dad, how do I buy Brock Bowers? I'm like, I'm sorry. You just can't. Like, it's not going to happen. If you want to buy a tight end, you buy Trey McBride at half the price because he's still going to put up elite level numbers. But Trey McBride, I've seen a ton of trades for him. I have not been seeing any trades for Brock Bowers, and that's what it should be. That's kind of where we are at. Wide receiver class, a lot of elite level wide receivers this season. Guys really stepped up. First guy I want to talk about Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. with 35.3% of his team's yards, only trailing Jamar Chase in the entire NFL. Brian Thomas Jr. went from a guy that when we were at that 108, 109 range, you're like, okay, we'll gladly take him here. He went to the Jaguars. Some people soured, even though we were like, this is the perfect landing spot. He's going to go to a team where he is going to dominate targets, 144 targets. He looked fantastic. And then when Trevor Lawrence actually went out, he even excelled even further with Mac Jones. So he is someone that I've moved all the way up to my Dynasty wide receiver 7. Brian Thomas Jr. has to be the largest Dynasty riser. And a big thing where in the middle of the year where people were starting to get frustrated with the Jaguars offense, you and I were really strong proponents of doing insulated trades. You and I talked about that one where I traded Devonta Smith and a second for Brian Thomas Jr. in a first. That first became 105 now. So now I'm going to be getting, probably Quinshon Judkins and Brian Thomas Jr. for, Devonta Smith. And that's why we talk about insulated trades at the right timing. Beginning of the year, people were soured on him. They saw a little bit of flash. In the middle, you had another buying window. Towards the end, you just can't buy him anymore. Like, he has gone full circle.
Yeah, he's a superstar and feels good just knowing I had him graded as a top 10, top 15 NFL prospect in general in the whole class. I thought he got wicked underdrafted and the Jaguars got a steal on him. He should have been a guy that went 12 or 11 or 10. He was that type of talent, but people just thought he was just because he's a third-year breakout and didn't do anything before that year. One-hit wonder, product of Jaden Daniels, all this. Now, you could see if you watch the tape, the talent that he was after the catch, the talent he was downfield, electric playmaker, elite athlete, could win at the catch point, was just good all around. So Brian Thomas Jr. was a favorite of ours for sure.
Brian Thomas Jr. became available at the price he was because Quentin Johnston sucked so bad in 2023. It really was because it was like, hey,
everyone thought he was the next Quentin Johnston.
And he was absolutely not. And Quentin Johnston had a great 2024. No, I'm not going to lie. You know, he had a very productive touchdown season. But I mean, Brian Thomas Jr., 129 targets. Out of the guys that, you know, he had 1,282 yards. You look at the other guys that are in that similar area, every single one of them had 140 plus. Like, he's the only guy. You're looking at anybody that was up over 1,100 yards. It was him and Trey McBride were the only guys that didn't have 140 plus targets. So he did it, and he did it with minimal amounts. You know, and that's the part that really sticks out to me. His target percentage, 23.6. was the lowest out of anybody that put up over 100 or over 1,000 yards. Brian Thomas Jr., we just saw, you know, a great flash, but I think this is a long career of these kind of things. If Trevor Lawrence can improve, if Ben Johnson becomes their, you know, head coach, if they bring in somebody that's a lot more offensive minded and they unlock Trevor Lawrence, Snoop, could we see him enter that elite stratosphere, that area with Neighbors, that area with CeeDee Lamb? I mean, I feel like the ceiling is up there. I'm not saying it's Jefferson Chase, but it's top 5, and he's at 7 already.
Yeah, I think he's going to be in that like top 7, 8 range for a while. As long as he has Trevor Lawrence there, they bring in a new offensive coordinator, a new head coach, kind of help build an offense to elevate Trevor Lawrence and the talent surrounding him. Because we saw the reason why I wanted Brian Thomas Jr. on the Jaguars all offseason, that was my dream landing spot. Trevor Lawrence hasn't had that true wide receiver one. We saw Calvin Ridley in that role fail. He couldn't play that like vertical alpha role that Brian Thomas Jr. thrived in this year, to go for 1,282, 75 plus yards per game, 16 plus fantasy points per game, finishing like top 4. Like the things that he did were Calvin Ridley's weaknesses, and that's why I thought it was going to be a perfect fit. People thought they were crowded. People thought the room was crowded. Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, all these guys, they're all Jags. They're all like good role player plus. Like Brian Thomas Jr. was a stud. They took him in the first round. We saw what Trevor Lawrence did with T. Higgins and Justin Ross, those 2 big, tall, athletic freaks that can win downfield consistently. Brian Thomas Jr. fits that mold, came in, perfect landing spot.
And some of the trades I've been seeing on Dynasty Data Lab, I'm telling you, they just drive me nuts. 107 and 110 for Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, you're hoping one of those is Brian Thomas Jr. Even though this class is good, I'm not touching that. You know, we're looking at this one's kind of fun. Malik Neighbors and a 26 first, or Brian Thomas Jr. in the 103.
BTJ.
Yeah, that's crazy, because I know we're going to talk about Neighbors next and how much you and I absolutely love him. But I mean, Najee Harris and the 102. I think I'm still laying BTJ. It's got to be a little bit more. Saquon in a second for BTJ. It's still BTJ. No. We just did a show on foundational wide receivers. He is one of them. He's one of those guys where you are going to build around him. This is someone that, just like Malik Neighbors, the next guy we're going to talk about, you know, number 2 in all of targets as a rookie. Catchable targets, that's a different kind of thing. But target percentage, you know, he 32.2% target share. That's insane as a rookie.
166 targets, and he played in like 14 and a half games. That's insanity.
I know. 109 receptions, 1,200 yards, still just 7 touchdowns. So is it possible that we saw, like I said with Brock Bowers, I feel like we saw the floor of Malik Neighbors. Like we saw what he is capable of with the worst quarterback situation. Because, right, let's be honest. Malik Neighbors is better than Garrett Wilson. We've made excuses for Garrett Wilson, Drake London, guys like that in the past. You could argue that his situation this year was worse than any of theirs in the past. I mean, these quarterback play of Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito towards the end was.
I would argue that Jets situation's worse, but there's no one worse than either of those New York situations.
They're bad.
Garrett Wilson literally had a tight end playing quarterback for 3 games. Like at least Daniel Jones isn't as bad as like Zach Wilson was or Tim Boyle, even though they both had Tim Boyle. Both terrible though, but we always knew Malik Neighbors was better than Garrett Wilson.
And we talked about this on the foundational wide receiver show, but it's like Malik Neighbors, his best case scenario next year is probably a sign and trade with Sam Darnold, which I think he would honestly, I think this year he finished top 10. I feel like he has the potential to finish top 5. If I'm trading for him, I got some trades on Data Lab that I wanted to talk to you about. 25-105, a 25-205, Malik Neighbors or Justin Jefferson.
So 2 first and Neighbors, or is it 1?
No, 105-205 Neighbors, and then Jefferson.
Give me Neighbors. I'm
I
taking
think I
Neighbors because
if
this is
that
the
was
guy that
108,
averaged.
I wouldn't. If
It's a guy that
105, I'm
averaged
going to do it.
18. Yeah, he averaged 18 points per game, 1,200 plus yards, all in like 15 games, 160 plus targets, 100 plus receptions, finishing like the top 7 to 8. Like this is a guy that fully healthy, playing a full 17 games, probably crashed the top 3. And
Yeah.
I think as long as he gets like a QB that's competent and can be like a Sam Darnold, Kirk Cousins type, he's gonna be like a top 5 finisher every year. So it's like I get another 105 on top. It's definitely decently close from like the lens of like a cornerstone piece like Justin Jefferson. But like if I'm just consolidating in a deep league with start 10 or 11, I'm gonna make that move 10 times out of 10. Take that first, take a Judkins, take one of these stud running backs, or flip it and go get someone that I can get like an AJ Brown or someone that's like a little bit undervalued right now that people are just thirsty for draft capital, and you can take advantage of that.
I think what a lot of people are going to say is, well, Dad, I mean, he had 166 targets, 39.4% of his team's, yards, 32.2% target share. Those are as high as you can get in the NFL. But what I'm looking at is 11.05 yards per reception. He's much better than that. We've seen it. It should be hovering more in that 13 to 15 range like Chase and Jefferson. And then you see 7.2 yards per target. Again, that's going to go up to 9, 10. It was just poor quarterback play, just trying to pepper him. The other trades, I mean, I see Breece Hall and Sam Darnold for Malik Neighbors. That's not even close. Malik Neighbors are 2 random 26 firsts, not close. Marvin Harrison Jr. and 2.25 seconds, both late for Malik Neighbors. The argument in the draft that you and I were trying to navigate for everybody is, if you don't like Marv, trade down to Malik because he could be just as good, if not better. He was better. And you and I talked about it when we were talking foundational wide receivers again. Sometimes it's good to make these trades, right? Where you trade Jefferson for Chase Plus in 2023. And then in 2024, you do it the other. Well, you could have done it with Lamb. You could have done it with there. Now we're talking about, would you trade Neighbors? What's the gap between? I don't think 2 seconds is getting it done for me. I think it's a first the other way now.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, I think it's probably a late first. I'd say it's a first range. I'm still bullish on Marv. Like I think everyone's overreacting. I'm fully in on him. I'm gonna buy him everywhere this offseason. I think that people just have to realize that not everybody's gonna be a 1,200 yard guy in year 1. Like it's that simple. Mm-hmm. Like Drake London wasn't, Jackson Smith and Jigbo wasn't. A lot of these guys weren't. And like Drake London, Marv had a very similar year, but better than his rookie year. Mm-hmm. Both had like 110 targets. Marv was far better in the red zone, scored more touchdowns. I hate hypotheticals, but what Marv actually truly should have had if Kyler wasn't terrible and didn't underthrow him on all these plays and miss him on big touchdowns, would have been 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. And if he did that, everybody would look at it differently.
85 and 8 is not far off. I mean, you look at what Kyler Murray versus Daniel Jones and Drew Lock, Neighbors did it with less. You know what I mean? So that's where, if you're going to do an insulated trade, I'm not personally doing it, but I think if you wanted to do that and you could get the 1.8 plus Marv, I think you could at least consider it, kick the tires there a little bit. Yeah. Marv has to be a buy going into the offseason. Trey McBride isn't going anywhere, though. You have to look at Trey McBride in that offense. 26.5% target share is considerably over what Marv was. He is at least. Malik has nothing else there, so he's going to get peppered and see that kind of volume. Marv still, I think, in 2025 doesn't quite see that same volume, but I do think we see closer to 140 targets, closer to 80, 85 receptions. Maybe, he breaks 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns. Yeah. Where would that put him in the dynasty wide receiver landscape? I mean, if he does that with his pedigree, I mean, he instantly goes back to where Brian Thomas Jr. is right now over Nico.
Definitely. Yep.
Like he becomes a top 5 to 8 wide receiver.
People are so reactionary with the market and how it goes. Like Ladd's 197 yards in that game against the Texans. I guarantee you, if you looked on like Keep Trade Cut and some of these consensus sites, he's already up like 5 spots from that one game. It's how it is. It's just, you got to take advantage of that. If you're always ahead of that curve, you will do very good in Dynasty. And it's always like, go to the Marv owner if you have Ladd and say, give me Marv in a second. I'll give you Ladd. See if that gets done. I'm sure it will in some leagues. So
let's get a couple trades here. Drake London and Ladd McConkey, or Marvin Harrison Jr. and Garrett Wilson.
Ooh,
There's a
that's
third
tough.
throw in here too, but I don't care.
I'm taking Garrett and Marv there.
Yeah, I am too.
Better players.
Marvin Harrison
talents.
Jr., Austin Eckler, and Tyrone Tracy, or Bucky Irving and the 106.
106 and Bucky. Easy.
What if it was? It would have to be like 12 to even be in the same area. Let's see. Let's pull up a cover. Jalen McMillan and a 25 first. It says mid. They haven't done their draft yet.
Marv.
Or Marv and a pair of threes.
Marv.
Yeah. They're not on the same stratosphere there. Garrett Wilson or Marv straight up.
Garrett, slightly. I would take Marv over every pick in the 2024 5 class besides the 101 right now.
We're gonna do that at the end of we're gonna do it at the end of this show. I think man, if Tet goes to the Patriots, I'm taking him. Year one, he's gonna be I think he's gonna have a Brian Thomas Jr. type year one. How about let's see, Marvin or Ladd straight up?
Marv.
We talked about this last show. How about Marv and a early second or Puka Nacua?
Puka.
I agree. One last one here. Bijan or Marv in 2 seconds?
Bijan.
Yeah, I'm sticking with Bijan there too.
I'm not taking a single. There's the only wide receivers I'd take over Gibbs or Bijan is J. Jeff and Jamar. There's not a single wideout I'm taking over either of them. Not even close. Everyone keeps saying like Neighbors over him, Amon-Ra over him. No. They're going to be running backs that get you 350 plus fantasy points for the next 5 years. Why would you ever take a wide receiver when there's a million good wide receivers over him? That's how I feel about the running back landscape with that.
I can see what you're saying.
Would you take Mike Evans and some of these guys over Kamara, CMC, Derrick Henry, Kamara, CMC a couple of years back? No, absolutely. Just because they play wide out. Think of all the people that took Michael Thomas over Alvin Kamara, like in 2019, 2020 drafts. That's the MT year. Hey, longevity's not guaranteed for anybody.
Longevity's not guaranteed.
Have been having it.
The points that Michael Thomas put up there for a short stretch were absolutely phenomenal.
That's what I'm saying. You know? Longevity ain't guaranteed for nobody. It don't matter if you're a running back or wideout.
So the Chargers have had 3 rookie wide receivers over 1,000 yards. John Jefferson, 1,001 yards. Keenan Allen, he's not bad. He did 1,046. Ladd McConkey, 1,054. Also the most receptions for a Charger rookie at 77. So, I mean, he really came on late. Stud. And he came on big time. So Ladd McConkey was one where, similar to Brian Thomas Jr., right? You get this opportunity in rookie drafts where people, they draft them. They get a little disappointed. They want to flip. They kind of go through those ruts. And this is where you and I do this process all year long, where if you believe in a guy, that gives you opportunities. I mean, for instance, up to week 6, Ladd McConkey he had a wide receiver 19 and 18 week, but not a single game over 7 targets. Yep. What he was able to do down the stretch then, he had just some crazy games, big time touchdowns. He ended up finishing, as someone that you are firmly investing in. I don't think he has the same
Waddle rookie year to me. That's like the type of rookie year he had, like that 1,000 yards, got a lot of receptions, utilized big, and then he was the clear wide receiver one there. Now, where I get stuck with Ladd is like, what if the Chargers go draft Tyreek Hill, or what if they go get T. Higgins? Like, does he lose value? Does he stay the same? Is he more of like a Jalen Waddle, Smitty Higgins, like 1B? Like, that's where I'm a little. They're not rolling it out for the next 4 years, couple of years with just Ladd McConkey. There's no way. There's no way.
They're gonna bring in competition. Yeah. I think his skill set. I hate to even just go with Cooper Kupp for obvious reasons, but like his skill set,
yeah, you're right though,
leads to a secondary wide receiver who puts up big numbers. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like there easily could be a Puka Nacua type that comes in there and plays opposite him, and they're very complementary. And with Justin Herbert, that I think they could both be over 1,000 yards. Is Ladd McConkey at the peak value he'll ever be?
No. I think he can gain a little bit of value. I think he could be a guy viewed as the top 10. He's close to his ceiling, though. I think you can argue that. I think his ceiling
inside
is like 100 receptions. I think his ceiling's like what we saw from JSN this year with more touchdowns. 100 receptions, 1,100, 1,200 yards, maybe 9 touchdowns is his ceiling. if they don't add anybody. If they add people, I think he's valued at his ceiling right now. Like, I think he's like
he's
that
not
fringe.
an active sell. No,
I don't think
not
he's an
an
active sell,
but
no. But I would look to tier up. If I can get
yes,
BTJ and a BTJ for Ladin a second, Marvin a first for Ladin an early second, Marvin a 27 first for Ladin an early, like anything like that. Ladin 2 seconds for Marvin a first. If you could just take any advantage of stuff like that is what I'd try to do.
and I'm seeing people give early seconds to get to BTGA or firsts to get to Malik Neighbors, and I would do that all day. As good as Lad is, I just don't see the long-term longevity the same way as those guys. I mean, I think I should say, I think he has a long career, but I don't think he has the same upside across that career. Like, I think he has a ton of upside. He's going to be a fantastic player, but just not quite the same. And those are the prizes of this year's class. Those were the guys where every single one of them went first round. Those were the guys you got at the end of the first round. How confident are you that we can find those gems in the late first round of this year's rookie draft? Because I think Emeka Egbuka, I think Luther Burden, maybe even Travis Hunter fall into that area, Trey Harris. Do you feel like we see 2 or 3 of those guys hit, or does it feel like if we get one, we're lucky?
I think 2 to 3. If we fast forward to next year and Emeka Egbuka, Luther Burden, and Trey Harris kind of all go in that first round range and all have like good rookie years, 800 plus, 900 plus yards, couple touchdowns, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Like, that's kind of what I'm expecting. It's the depth of this class that stinks. Like, Tez Johnson is a great player. Like, he's a good, like, little number 2, number 3 on an NFL offense, in my opinion. But like, the fact he's my wide receiver 6 in this class is like, that's when you're kind of like, oof. Like, and if Travis Hunter plays full-time DB, then he's my wide receiver 5 in this class, which is like so it's going to be definitely a weaker class. Definitely the weakest class I've looked at since probably going to be the worst class since 2018. If you think
in the wide receivers.
Or maybe 2019. It might be right there with 2019, but it ended up like Terry DK. Ended up get Debo. Yeah, no, it won't even touch that class. Yeah, so it's probably the worst wide receiver class since 2018.
So 2024, we still had Xavier Worthy, and a lot of people look at Xavier Worthy as a bust. But if you look from week 11 on, he was over 45 yards in every single game. He saw his snap percentage go up every single game. And you saw towards the end, he finished week 16 and 17 as wide receiver 11 and wide receiver 15 with getting absolutely peppered. I mean, he had 31 targets over the last 3 games. So Worthy really started to come on late. I think if we see Rashee Rice suspension go more than 6 games or things don't go well, Xavier Worthy could be a buy. He could be somebody that really, I mean, if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, Kelsey could retire. Worthy's going to see a lot more targets. Yeah. I think Xavier Worthy they'll go shift to a different style offense. I think the Chiefs wanted to air it out this year, but they lost Rice. They lost Hollywood. It was just Worthy. And I think Worthy is a complimentary wide receiver 2. If Rice plays all year, I think we really see Worthy even more on some home run balls.
Yeah, that was the biggest issue with Worthy was he looked great every time he touched the ball. He was playing very well. Him and Mahomes just couldn't connect. Mahomes missed him deep plenty of times. There was a whole thread on it that I saw on Twitter. It was like if they connected on 75% of this, Xavier Worthy would be top 15 in points per game right now. And he'd have like 13 or 14 touchdowns. He was a touchdown guy. I mean, he had like Jackson Smith and Jigba rookie year. He had like 650 receiving yards and like 60 catches. That's only playing 16 games, not playing that last game against Denver at all. But he finished off strong. Like he had 3 straight 20-plus point per game. He had 3 games of 20-plus points, and that was against Houston and Pittsburgh's defense. So I think his utilization in the red zone is very good, and his utilization kind of in just like the bubble screen game and like the rushing game and the way the Chiefs are going to use him, they're going to ease him more and more into it. And I think once they get Rashee Rice back, they're going to start taking some more deep shots downfield when they put the team to sleep with a bunch of slants and little digs and all these routes Rice runs. They're going to just let it fly to Worthy. So I think Worthy's a great player. I think his ceiling, he's kind of in that like Jameson Williams type range where it's like he'll probably have a couple of years with like 1,000 yards, 6 to 8 touchdowns and finish like top 30. But I don't think he'll ever really be like a top 10, top 12 guy. he's more of like a boom bust flex that could have some big years, in my opinion. But he's very good. Like he's a very good NFL piece for the Chiefs. Very
We
good
skipped over Rome Odunze because you could not be more frustrated with any of the wide receivers than him. You know, over 100 targets, 17.3% target share was a little bit lower than what we had expected. 54 receptions, 734 yards, just 3 touchdowns. And I mean, what we saw in college, we loved Rome Odunze, contested catch marvel, guy that really nuanced and did really well when we're talking about, you know, how he tested out for reception, perception, those kind of things. I think Rome Odunze does bounce back here. It's just a matter of what coach do we bring in? What kind of offensive coordinator? What are we going to run here? Caleb Williams' progression, and is Keenan Allen still part of this? You know, like it gets to be, and I know I brought this up on the sales show, and not that I'm anti Rome Odunze, because you know, in the rookie process last year, I loved him. Like I absolutely loved him. What my worry always is for every Jackson Smith and Jigba that comes out and becomes a top 10 wide receiver the next year, there's the other area where he gets injured or struggles, and that value takes a massive hit.
Yeah, he's very similar to like that JSN. Even like looking back at Jerry Jeudy's rookie year, very similar rookie year. Literally 50 plus receptions, 700 plus yards, 3 touchdowns. Damn near identical to a Jerry Jeudy. Situation matters. Not everybody's Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr. and can be very good with anything, like, or Garrett Wilson or some of these other guys that produce with nothing. Like some wide receivers, and especially when you're considered the third option behind a DJ Moore and a Keenan Allen, who are vets that are been very good in the league for a while. And you just look at his situation, it's damn near identical to Jackson Smith. And he's not as good as Jackson Smith, in my opinion, but he's good enough to be a top 15, top 20 wide receiver in Dynasty. And he's good enough to be a guy that can come in and be a 1B in an offense. So I think best case scenario, Ben Johnson, one of these good coaches and a good offensive coordinator, comes in. Caleb takes the next step. It's DJ Moore and Rome. Kind of Keenan Allen gets kind of kicked to the curb, maybe traded, cut, whatever they do with him. And then it's just maybe he ends up with like 130, 140 targets next year. But if you just look at how good Keenan Allen did in the last few games, like that's what I look at. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be Rome Odunze at some point because they win similarly, right? Like Rome wins in that same way as Keenan Allen, and Rome can also win downfield. So I think Rome got better and better, and he flashed a lot of big elite plays in a lot of situations. That's like, what are you doing, Caleb Williams? Like that was horrible. So I think Rome's going to be a guy that bounces back. Maybe it could be a year 3 breakout. It could be next year. I hope it's next year, but I like this right now because we have a buying opportunity on him.
We were definitely not expecting, especially after he got shot, that Ricky Pearsall would have more wide receiver 1 weeks than Rome Odunze, but he did, and he only played, you know, a handful of games. But you look at Ricky Pearsall down the stretch. Week 10, he had a real big game, 4 for 73. Week 17, 8 for 141. Week 18, 6 for 69. Threw up 2 touchdowns in those last 2 weeks. Is this a preview of what's to come? You know, we're going to come to another Brandon Ayuk saga of what's he going to do? Is he going to play for this team? Which, by the way, I'm buying Ayuk everywhere I can because I feel like we'll figure out what happens here. Debo kind of took a step back. Is Ricky Pearsall, is this going to be his time to shine in 2025? I mean, because you're still able to buy him for almost the same as you drafted him for. And he put together a nice little stretch there down the last couple of games.
Yeah, I think he's a good little buy low. I mean, he just screams San Fran. Like his play style fits that offense. He's kind of like an Ayuk in a way. Like he plays similar to Ayuk. He's not as good as a route runner. He's not as explosive. He's not on Ayuk's level, but he's good enough where I think in the right situation, like San Fran with Purdy and with Shanahan and with an offense like that, it can elevate him big time. And he can be a guy that comes in next year or the year after, and he's like a 200 to 220 point scorer, takes that next big step where he's like a Jaden Reed or like how Rashee Rice was his rookie year, like one of these guys. And then all of a sudden people are like, okay, he's him. Like he's the real deal. All people need to see is that like 900 to 1,000 yard and a couple touchdowns mark, and they will skyrocket in value. That's like the thesis in everybody's head at a young age at these wide receivers. Like you see that and they're gaining value. So I think he could do that.
People don't seem to understand, and we've alluded to it multiple times. You draft rookie wide receivers because if your 106 is worth this player we've already seen, but the 106 can really give you a lot of opportunities to buy in. And I'm looking at Keon Coleman next, and Keon Coleman was going 202. You look at the first 6 weeks of the season, not a lot. He's not doing much. He's not getting that, nothing over 70% snap share. Then week 7, 8, and 9, he had 70% target share, was inside the top 24, back to back to back. And you know what? I was flipping for 25 firsts everywhere because that's just the process, right? You buy him for a second, you get him in there, then he gets injured. Now he's a buy again, arguably. But I mean, it's like Buffalo, Josh Allen's just so good. He's doing it with everybody. So Keon Coleman, we didn't love during the process. Goes to the Bills. We love the landing spot. And that's what's nice about rookie draft, Snoog, is you have opportunities. It makes better dynasty trade opportunities because you drafted him. I was getting him 203, 204, flipped in a couple spots for a 25 first. Now I get him Mika Ibuka, and now I'm like, okay, now I have another opportunity to move up.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, that's the process too. It's draft picks don't lose value. That's what I tell everybody. No matter what, there's always going to be that one person that has FOMO. They want to pick on draft day, rookie draft, the draft. They're watching all this stuff, and they're like I want to take this guy now. Like I saw all this hype. They see Danielle Jeremiah gassing him up on Twitter, anything like that. That pick gains value. Like it always does. People will be like, oh, well, what if like the year of 2022, everyone was like, what if Breece Hall doesn't go this high and this guy doesn't do this and there's no quarterbacks taken like that? Look at how it ended up. Like guys will always be good in the draft class at some point just because of draft capital and how teams will utilize those guys. So I just think taking that re-roll, it always works, especially if you just take that pick on draft day and flip it for another guy. Like you could always just work that process.
And we were drafting Jalen McMillan in the mid-3rd, sometimes early 4th. And when Chris Godwin went down, wow. It took him a couple weeks. Godwin went down in week 6, week 7 and 8. He was sprinkled in there, getting a couple of targets. By the time week 13 rolled around, 14, you look at him and he had 5 straight finishes inside the top 20. He had 1, 2, oh my gosh, like 3, 4, 5, 6 touchdowns in the final 5 weeks. No, that ain't even right. 7 touchdowns in the final 5 weeks. He just exploded.
Yeah,
the tricky part is I believe Godwin comes back, and I could see them they're in that early 20s range. I believe they have picked 21 or 22, which is where a lot of these wide receivers are projected to go. So I'm hesitant to buy Jalen McMillan, even as good as he played. But if the Bucks pass on a wide receiver round 1, McMillan has wide receiver 2 upside for 2025. I could see them go and take a wide receiver. But if
I've seen him go for a 27 first in a league. Really? One league, he went for a 27 first for McMillan and a 27
second.
His mom? Someone did that. I have no idea, but
family member?
That was a thing, and a lot of people on Twitter, I've seen polls and stuff. A lot of people think he's valued like highly. Like people taking him pretty good. Like I saw like McMillan in a second versus like Waddle, and it was like decently close poll. Like people are high on this kid, and I mean he's a good player. What's the ceiling? I don't know. I think he'll be kind of like that. I don't even know, like a top 40 dynasty wide receiver, like a guy that's like a strong flex play. Maybe has a spike year. I mean, but if Godwin's gone and he's in the Godwin role with Baker, how he's been playing, like he could be elevated.
I would have loved to see Adonai Mitchell in that situation instead. But when I'm looking at his chart now, and you go on Sleeper and anything that's outside the top 40 is all in red. His whole chart is all red. Like he only had 2 games where he had a snap share over 50%. He only had 1 game over 50 yards. And I'm like, I loved Adonai Mitchell. I feel like as long as Anthony Richardson's there, it's not going to happen.
He's got the worst starting quarterback in the NFL.
Stuck in that area. The other guy from this class is Xavier Legette. As fun it is to watch him, as funny it is to hear him talk about eating raccoons, like Xavier Legette, he had some flashes throughout the year.
I think he's gonna be a good role player, but that's all he is. He'll be like an upside role player guy, like maybe a number 2, number 3 guy. But I think that if they go get like a Tet, I think it'll help Legette thrive with Thielen. Like imagine they have Tet, Thielen, and Legette next year with JT Sanders. Like that Panthers team could make some noise in that division. So.
And I do this a lot on Twitter, but I wanted to do it on the podcast for you guys that don't follow on Twitter, guys that are just listening. I compare the 24 and 25 classes. You just like, so you can see what the next year's class looks like. So Snoog and I are going to do a quick back and forth. We're going to do a quick draft of the 2 wide receiver classes. I always try to flash flash a little prominence and take the 101 every time because Snoog's better at digging deep. For me, Malik Neighbors is still the prize of the two classes. I think Malik Neighbors arguably could be the wide receiver 1 overall in Dynasty by the end of the year. So I'm taking Malik Neighbors with wide receiver 1 between the two classes.
Yeah, 102, I'd take Brian Thomas Jr. here. I mean, this is a guy that averaged 75 plus receiving yards per game, went for 1,280 something receiving yards as a rookie with Mac Jones playing half the season, multiple touchdowns, multiple big plays, big elite plays, overthrown on plays, 16 plus fantasy points per game, finishes the wide receiver 4 in total fantasy points. What's the long-term outlook? Tied to Trevor Lawrence, good coaching staff potentially coming in, like a Ben Johnson, one of these head coaches, potential with a new offensive coordinator as well. I think Press Taylor's ass is gone. So a lot of good things for the better for Brian Thomas Jr. coming in the future. And it's crazy to say for how good he did.
So we kind of already determined the draft order here. So on draft day, if Ted McMillan goes to the Panthers or the Patriots, I'm moving him to 3. We'll get to that later. But I'm going to take, as of right now, I'm going to take Ladd McConkey. And I think Ladd McConkey is just safe. We saw him end on a super effective run. We saw what he could do with Justin Herbert. I think he's just that kind of wide receiver where he's going to be a back-end wide receiver 1 in Dynasty for a long time. Do I think he's ever going to finish wide receiver 1? Absolutely not. He does not have that in the range of outcomes to be the wide receiver 1 overall unless something would change. However, he is a nice, solid guy that I think you can build around as your wide receiver 2 in Dynasty and just dominate.
Yeah, with the 104, I'm going to go with the best buy in Dynasty right now, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr. I think the Cardinals figure it out next year. Kyler will be 2 years removed from torn ACL. McBride and Marv are going to take the next big step, in my opinion. McBride already did, but I think Marv, 880 plus yards and 8 touchdowns as a rookie, not accounting for all the misses that Kyler Murray had and all the targets that he had in the red zone that were overthrown or underthrown or whatever it was, but they're going to get him utilized. I bet you that's going to be their number 1 game plan as an offensive scheme next year is how can we get the ball in Marvin Harrison Jr.'s hands? Because there was plays against Jalen Ramsey, like when they played the Dolphins, when they played the Rams, he was cooking. He was cooking crosshairs, cooking on plays versus man coverage. Kid can play ball. People are forgetting already just because he didn't have that crazy year. He had that CeeDee Lamb type rookie season. One of the best buys in Dynasty, and I think that he's going to have a big year 2 and year 3 coming forward.
Give me Ted McMillan here at 5. He's the wide receiver 1 of this class, and it's not even close. Like I said, you could argue him at 3 because coming out the pedigree of back-to-back 1,300 yards compared to what Ladd did, I think if he goes into the right spot early, I think this is a guy that you're going to see that is a Dynasty wide receiver 1 year in and year out that has top 3 to 5 upside in the entire landscape. So I'm taking Ted here for sure. And now we're 5 picks in, and we've got 4 guys in 2024 and 1 in 25. Are you going to change the breakdown here? Or are you sticking with 2024?
I think this would definitely be a tier. I think those guys we
That's
talked about
break,
above were kind of like a tier. This is a tier break here now. If I can project guaranteed Emeka Egbuka goes top 25 first round pick and goes to a decent situation, I'm taking him here over Rome. But just today, I'm going with the guy that went top 10 in the NFL draft in a stack wide receiver class, tied to Caleb Williams. Another situation that can only get better. They had no coach for half the season. Ben Johnson's a potential candidate to go there and save that team. They just need structure. Keenan Allen's on his last leg. Cole Kmet's nothing. It's literally just going to come down to Rome, DJ Moore, and Caleb with a good offensive coordinator and a good head coach potentially. I'll make that bet and make the bet on him being a guy that can score 250 plus fantasy points within the next 2 years and be a guy that can go for 1,100 to 1,200 yards in a year. So,
yeah, I'm gonna take Emeka Egbuka here because we already just talked about it, and you could also argue, the next 3 guys when we did our wide receiver rookie show, all 3 of these guys are in that same area. I'm with you now. I think Egbuka he's the most pro ready of the 3. I think he has a ton of upside. I think we're going to see him go potentially top 15 to 20, maybe definitely in the top 25, and he's going to be worth it. A guy that's a steal in super flex leagues right now. We got 2 more rookies from this class. We're splitting hairs, but Burden and Hunter going 8 and 9. Why are you going Burden this time?
Yeah, I'm just going to go Burden because as of right now, I don't know what Travis Hunter is going to do. He could play DB. He could play both. He could play just wide out. If he plays just wide out, he'd be way up this list for me. But right now, he's projected to be a DB. So I'm going to go with Burden here, a guy that had an elite sophomore season, 1,200 plus yards, elite yak player, DJ Moore, Jaden Reed type player for me, good in space, fits today's NFL mold well. And that sophomore season was special in the SEC for Missouri. Did have a down year as a junior, but I think the quarterback play and just the offensive success in general was terrible at Missouri. So it led to that kind of trickling down Luther Burden's way. But I think Luther Burden's a guy that wide receiver 3 in this class, first round grade for me. And he's a guy that would be top 5 in most classes.
Yeah. And I mean, Travis Hunter, 96 receptions, 1,258 yards, 15 touchdowns, playing both ways. Like, to get him at 9 in a combination here, definitely the wide receiver 3 of this class. And I think the only reason you're getting him this low is the threat of playing both ways, or not even playing, maybe just playing corner primarily, then sprinkled in. Like, a lot of people seem to think that it's going to be more like Devin Hester back in the day, where you're like, oh, they'll throw him in for 3 plays a game. And I think if he does play both ways, it's going to be considerably more than that. But it's a lot different playing both ways in college than it is in the pros. So you're up at now we have it broken down. We're in 9. We have 4 guys from this class, 5 guys from the other class from 2024. What are we doing next?
I think 10 and 11 would be like a separate tier from 12 through the rest of them. But I'm going to go with Xavier Worthy here. I think I loved what I saw from him as a rookie. I saw a lot of upside. I saw a lot of flashes in this Chiefs offense. It's an offense that spreads the ball around a lot, but towards the end, I mean, 3 straight games with 20-plus points. He had multiple – I think he had 4 or 5 20-plus point games this year. A lot of games with touchdowns. Outside of like 3 or 4 bad games, he honestly had a really solid rookie year. I mean, he had like a JSN rookie year, like 650 yards, 60 receptions. He did have like 8 or 9 total touchdowns, or even 10 with the rushing touchdowns that he had. I think there's a world where if Matt Nagy ever goes as the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs, I could see a world where like Mahomes comes back, and it's like he's back to that 4,500, 5,000 yard range. And I think Rice and Worthy, 1A, 1B, can be very good long term with Kelsey gone. I think it's just a scheme right now and how they're winning. They don't really need it like that. But I think Worthy, when Mahomes starts connecting on some of those deep shots, they're going to start making some noise.
I think the only reason the next guy at 11 here, Trey Harris, is below some of these guys is the fact that he only played in 7 games this past year. You know, he got banged up, but in those games, you know, he's a guy 6'3", 210 pounds, put up over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. First in all of college football in yards per route run. First in all of yards per route run versus man, second in yards per route run versus zone. I mean, his yards per route run versus man was 9.28, Snook. That's just ridiculous.
He dominated. I think we get a stamp. I think we get a stamp that he's going to be a first round pick, and we got to be ahead of the game, because a lot of people are kind of just trying to see what happens with him. But I think I know a lot of smart people that I've kind of paid attention to on Twitter and on the YouTube space have said like they think he's a first round player. Like he can go in the first round or early day 2 maybe. But I think like in a weak class like this, it's perfect to like take a shot on an upside guy like Trey Harris in that like early second range, mid second range. And like he has all that upside. He's like 6'3", 210. Imagine him 20th to the Broncos as like they're like Cortland Sutton, Michael Thomas for Sean Payton. Like that's a lot of people's comp for him is Michael Thomas. He's like that big physical 6'3" guy, wins at the catch point, wins downfield. But he was Sutton type guy, but yeah, he's explosive.
17.2 yards per reception. That's insane. But now we get to a tricky part. So now I feel like you're right. We get to a new tier area. We're at pick 12. Who do you got?
Jalen McMillan. I'm not going to erase what he did because Godwin was out, because it comes down to for a lot of people is opportunity. And Jalen McMillan got the opportunity and was absolutely phenomenal in that. You could almost look at it like the Bucs saying, okay, Chris Godwin had another season-ending leg injury. We want to get out of his contract. We can trade him, do whatever. McMillan stepped up big time. He could be that number 2 behind Mike Evans. Or even long-term, if you look at 2 years down the road, Mike Evans, Godwin, both like in their mid to late or like mid-30s, probably done. Jalen McMillan could slide into that 2 or number 1 role potentially, but he looked great. I mean, he had like 8 touchdowns in 14 games. Absolutely phenomenal when Godwin left, if you look at the split. So he's someone tied to Baker Mayfield on a rookie contract in an offense that has been very good lately that I'm in on. And I would take him with that flash that he had over the rest of these guys here.
I'm taking Keon Coleman. I'm interested in, Aya Manors here. We got Tez Johnson here, Ricky Purcell. Those guys are all in that area. But I think like you said, you just said McMillan's tied to Baker Mayfield for multiple years. Keon Coleman flashed a little bit. He got banged up. If he stays healthy, we knew he was going to be a project coming in. I think we could see a nice little bump in value in year 2 for Keon Coleman. I'm not holding my breath, but we're talking about wide receiver 13 between the two classes. So you're up.
Yeah, I said Tez Johnson here, but I'm changing my pick to Ricky Pearsall just because of the backstage talk.
I love this. We've been like,
because now I get to really think through my process. I'm like thinking, okay, Debo's washed. Ayuk's injured on a season-ending leg injury. That offense is going to put up tons of points and yards. Pearsall might be that 1 or 2 option right there with Kittle. He's going to gain a ton of value heading into next year, I think, because he's finally fully healthy. And we saw him in the last 3 games when he was healthy. He was great. So I think he's a guy that can gain value that I can flip and turn into a Worthy or a Doomsday or a Marv, like Pearsall on a first for Marv.
People like him
Pearsall
too.
has a great second year. People love him. Yeah. So I think he's a guy that I want here. I would take him over Keon, I think, too, but it's close, like very close between those two. Because between like Keon, Trey Harris, Xavier Worthy, Ricky Pearsall, I think one of those guys takes a big step in like 2026, like has like a big gain in value. It's just figuring out who, and they all have right now good quarterbacks besides Trey Harris. So
yeah. And your wide receiver rookies and year 2 guys are the ones that ascend in value the most. I think we're real close here between Tez Johnson and Ayamanor. We're splitting hairs there, so that just kind of gives you our top 15 guys there, 16 actually, when we threw McMillan in there. So it gives you a nice idea of, what is this class going to be looking like? It's wide receiver week, so we did already a YouTube video on the wide receiver class. We're going to have an edit where we're going to go over the top 12 in tiers, so you can look at that. We're going to go over, your wide receiver buys and sells. We did our foundational wide receivers. I mean, if you missed any of those, you're missing the whole picture, because Snoog and I were talking about how this class, and we're going to get into this more, but the 2025 rookie class is not deep. So veteran wide receivers and wide receivers like Ricky Pearsall, like, Keon Coleman, they're not going to get as much competition as they would have in years past, where we're talking about 20 some wide receivers. I mean, we're lucky if we get 10 guys go in the first 3 rounds. And if we're only talking about 10 guys across 32 teams, the landscape doesn't change. However, the running back landscape, we're talking about 15 guys in the first 3 rounds, possibly at the running back position. That changes.
I think it's going to be the record.
It changes absolutely.
I said it was going to be the record in 2024 for wide receivers taken in round 1. And I think it's going to be the record for running backs taken in the overall draft this year. It was like 30 back in 2017. I think that we're going to break that or get close to it.
I would like to see what it is for like the first 2 rounds. I think the second round is going to be littered with running backs getting drafted.
It's going to be like when Dobbins, Akers, Swift, JT, all those guys went. It's going to be like that for me.
Absolutely. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire going in the first. We just don't need that. All right, guys. Again, make sure you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel. Check out the Patreon. Best deal out there right now. Thanks again for tuning in, and enjoy the process.